construction administration do's and don'ts. And I'm pretty sure I could talk about this topic for at least a few hours in terms of do's and don'ts, and as it relates to construction administration. But I'm actually going to focus on one topic only for this brief time, and that is substitutions. So how many of you have received a substitution request on your project usually? And you can do the little, I think there's a little hand raise button, on your, okay, I see 3, 4, 7. I mean, a good majority of you. I think it happens to me almost every single project. And some of the reasons, especially nowadays, could be, product availability, relationship with manufacturers. The installer could be more familiar with a system, or, there's a bunch of reasons. It could be a cost savings to the owner, or the owner wants this different system because it's cheaper. And so really, I saw a majority of people's hands went up during that. So that is the, key element I want to focus on. So whenever you get a substitution request, the first thing that should happen is a red flag should go up, okay? In our products specifications, those are our tried and true products through Walter P. Moore that have been vetted by people in our industry, and they have been used and we're familiar with them. And it is very important to understand the origins of your project and understand them completely before you accept a substitution. Because if you accept a substitution that's not going to work, and later on there's an issue with it, that responsibility is going to come back on you for approving that. So I am going to go into an example on a case study that we did, and it actually was a litigation case that we're currently working on, and I'll give you some of the story behind it. Before I continue on, there are these two EIFS systems, and this is actually what happened in the litigation case. There are two EIFS systems, okay? The system on the left and the system on the right. So the system on the left is the standard water master system, and the system on the right is the TEIFS Flex system. Both of them are by Parex, so they're not a different manufacturer. And these are the two standard details that you get when you look on the manufacturer's websites and what the components are for the system. So looking at these, I know it's kind of small on your screen, but can you tell any difference in these two systems, or do any differences jump out at you between these two systems?
Yes, the drainage pattern behind the EPS or XPS.
Okay, can you elaborate on that?
So that's basically the secondary layer for draining the water if there's any condensation in the system. There's a drainage pattern behind that insulation board that allows water drain from the joints.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else do you notice there that's similar in both images? At that plane you're on track, Mozzie.
Yes. And then also what they have done, they have used beads of material to basically simulate the same drainage layer, but they're basically vertically aligned, I guess. Perex adhesive. So they have used adhesive as a basically creating a pattern or gap between the the EPS to basically allow drainage. But I guess that's ineffective. I don't know.
So you're on the right track. I'm sort of intentionally trying to trick you and
Yeah.
have you guys think about it. So the system on the left does have the vertical drainage channels, and it also shows the notches in the insulation board. Typically with drained EIFS systems, you can accomplish the drainage plane by either or of those. You don't necessarily have to have both. And you can look at the ICCES reports. You don't always have to have both depending on the system. Sometimes they just say, okay, trowel on those vertical channels and have them go the whole way, and that's it. So does the system on the right also have it, just by what we talked about, does the system on the right also have a drainage plane? I mean, visually it looks like it does. So it has the Parex USA adhesive, same as the image on the left, Parex USA adhesive, and they're both in vertical ribbons. What's the big deal about these two products? So the system on the left was our original product that was specified by the architect in this litigation case. The system on the right was the system that was submitted by the installer because they said that they can install it quicker and they had greater familiarity with the system. So the architect reviewed it. They were like, okay, this checks the box. I think they made a comment about an accessory product for it, but they did not comment on any other aspect of the system. So maybe you guys can see where it's going, but I know the people who worked on this project with me in Dallas know what the difference is, but can anyone guess what the big difference is between these systems?
Well, the drainage plane is physically there, but it's not protected by proprietary or a third-party weather AWE layer.
So good catch, Ed. There is not an air or weather barrier on the substrate. Now, the installation guidelines for this system do call for that, so there is going to be one there. But here's the catch in this. The TEEF system on the right is not a drain system. It is, let me say that again. It is not a drain system.
So
So
the
even
bottom
though
extrusion, there's usually an extrusion at the bottom. It's an
it
extrusion,
is,
right?
there is, and there's but in this standard buildup between the two, if you were to just discount that they're missing the air vapor water barrier product on the substrate, if you were to look at this and you saw the vertical ribbons, would you think that it had a drainage plane?
Well, yes, but if it doesn't exit anywhere, it's useless.
Exactly. So when you dig into the TEEF system installation manual and you dig into, you know, how it's supposed to be installed and the details of it, it is actually a barrier system, meaning it does not have a drainage plane at the base of the walls. It does not call for a drainage plane at window heads. There are no flashings that go into it, period. So the architect looked at these images, they looked at the system, they were like, okay, it's an EVE system, I see vertical ribbons, etc. But they didn't do that background research to understand that the system itself functioned 100% differently, completely opposite than the system they had specified. And this is a classic example of them not understanding what the design intent was and understanding the substituted product. So before I go to the next slide, does anyone know, because I said this is a litigation project, does anyone know the implications of switching from a drain system to an undrained system without realizing it? I'm thinking code requirements, if that's a hint.
The right system is a phase seal system, but then the left side, it has the secondary plane of drainage, which allows any water that basically penetrates through the EFIS system, the coating system, it would allow that to drain behind that drainage pattern, basically.
Yes. But how does that affect what the code requires for each of these systems, and how is it different?
Detailing, I guess, at the V poles and the way that it has to be, the joints have to be designed. I'm guessing because in
No,
Canada, we don't
yeah,
allow the right one to be used. For
yep.
only left side is allowed to be used. Yeah.
Good point, Mozzie. I am talking US based, so I am talking more about like IBC requirements. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip to this next slide. In this case, the specified system, like I said, was an EAFS with drainage, and the submitted system was a barrier EAFS. Additionally, the designer called for a thin adhered brick to be applied to the base coat of the EAFS system for a different veneer finish, as you can see in the picture. It was supposed to be a combination of EAFS and thin brick veneer. But that when you got into the product specifications, it also noted by Parex that the base coat that was used in the submitted system cannot be allowed for adhered thin brick veneer. For two reasons, this system is not code compliant. And so the first reason is in, IBC, I'm thinking, the recent 2012, 2015, if you can have a barrier EAF system here in the US, you can, but it has to undergo special inspections in order to be allowed. So when they switched unknowingly to a barrier system, nothing was inspected. and therefore they didn't comply with the code requirements. Second, they also did not comply to the manufacturer requirements by using the thin brick veneer, because in the code, it states that you must comply with the manufacturer requirements for an EAF system. And so that is why, and unsurprisingly, when we went to site, there were areas where the thin brick was detaching from the substrate.
Jackie, I'm not familiar with this system. This is a 1/4 inch, that thin 1/4 inch veneer, brick veneer, and it's just glued onto the
Yeah,
EPS.
yeah. So you can, with
They
some of
put
the
a scratch
Parex
code on the
systems,
EPS to roughen
they
it up.
put,
And
Estoy en una
then,
they put
reunión, mi
all the
amor, ya voy.
codes. So Ed, just to let you know, the photo on the left, they embed the mesh and the 2 coats, the base coat and everything, but they don't put the finish coat. Instead of the finish coat, they adhere on a thin brick veneer, and you can do that according to the Parex manufacturer website. But of
Okay.
course, there are requirements on the thin brick veneer, weight requirements, etc. But you must use a very specific base coat in order to adhere it.
Okay, understood.
So to answer your question about that system. So kind of the moral of this story, when we saw this, we were like, whoa, be aware. Do not blindly accept substitutions, even if the products look visually similar. And that was my whole point in showing you guys the 2 initial like buildups from the same manufacturer. The initial buildup looks almost identical. You need to do thorough research on your product, especially if you are not familiar with it, and really try to stick to our tried and true systems when you can. I know, especially lately with the issues with supply chains and everything, I've had this whole ordeal on another project with concrete repair material substitutions, and it's been sort of a nightmare. But there's this very careful line between you're trying to be helpful and move a project along, and you're potentially getting yourself in trouble. I wanted to go from here. This was an example of something that we saw in a litigation case, and it was a really good reminder to us what you should be doing in your CA on your own projects. Does anyone have any similar stories, or a story where they had a substitution come through and it was totally out of left field, or something got really complicated from it?
Yeah, Jackie, I'm thinking, ever since you talked about this, I thought back to this one instance where we had an expansion joint, plaza expansion joint, and originally it was an M-seal system. And it's one of those complicated extrusions where we have multiple flaps and layers for the membrane to tie onto, and then you've got a protective plate at the top. Very elaborate. The CM had the sub provided a substitute by a company called Wabo, and the cut sheet for that extrusion looks almost identical, right? So
I'm sure.
the architect had accepted it, and then I was sort of asked the question about how to terminate it at the the horizontal joint terminates at a wall, and then it goes up the wall, right? And to do that, MCL has these custom-made accessories that do the turn for you, and it's very complicated to try and do it without it. Wabo, of course, says they had it, so it took 6 or 7 phone calls to find out that they don't have it, right? They never really had it, and they don't intend to have it. And so when I asked about advice about how to terminate up a wall, and how do how can you sell a product without an accessory system to turn up the wall, they go, well, you kind of do this and this and this, and it was over the course of 2 or 3 emails, very vague, and they weren't willing to submit me any diagrams or anything specific. Of course, that transition became a problem, and it was very, very difficult to sort of do a sort of a handmade transition, without a proper transition accessory, right? So the bottom line is, when you have a company like MCL, which I'm sure everyone knows is a big company, they will do the right thing and have these accessory systems, right? If you substitute something from a smaller company, it's the accessory systems that you have to find out whether or not they have.
I think
So
that's a great example, Ed, of knowing your system and what is available to the system. Even though the expansion joint looked the same,
right.
it caused all these subsequent problems later down the line. How did it turn out? Is it built now? Is it performing okay?
I don't know. This is while I was at Columbia, and it was very it was it took like 2 weeks to sort of detail, and then the owner of the waterproofing company came out and sort of did a handmade custom job. So we threw a lot of effort at it, but it was countless hours of both the installer and me as a project manager, CM, and it was just all because the architect had accepted the substitution that looked exactly the same, but he didn't think further to understand that in order for the prevailing system to work, you need accessory systems or accessory items to terminate it. So
yeah, no, that's great. I think that's a great example. That's right along the lines of what I was talking about, where sometimes it's not understood the implications of accepting a substitution, and really it can be hard and it can be difficult. Like I said, I have a project going on right now. It's a simple concrete repair. They have to do some full depth repairs. The concrete sub was like, yeah, we can't get these products. They're not available due to supply chain issues. They ended up submitting to me a completely inappropriate product that is supposed to be used more as a leveling compound or a top coat than a full, and they tried to use it for a full depth patch repair. And I had to fight them back and forth for about 3 weeks on this.
yeah.
So does anyone else have any more stories about, something like Ed and I, we saw it kind of from the outside. It didn't directly happen to us, but we kind of got to see it from a third party. Or do you have an example of something that's happened to you?
One example that is, I guess it falls under structural, and I've seen happening quite often when it comes to installing roof anchors and or balcony guards to floor slabs is use of chemical adhesive anchor systems by Hilti or Power Tools Redhead A7 Plus. We spec Hilti products with stainless steel threaded rods, which is HAS-R, and usually this is more expensive than other, I guess, uncertified threaded rods. And what I've seen contractors use, they buy they buy the chemical adhesive anchor from Hilti, and they use just anonymous some sort of I guess aftermarket threaded rods because it's cheaper. And I usually reject that because and they say this is just a threaded rod. What's the difference? And I say no, because the system has been tested with that threaded rod. And if you use any other threaded rods to anchor things to concrete, the system may not be certified, or might, if you test it, may fail. So you should be using the same threaded rod that was tested and it's supplied by Hilti. So if you're buying from either Redhead, um, or Power Tools or Hilti, you should be using the entire system, the chemical adhesive anchor plus the threaded rod and nuts and whatever, the entire system, not matching from different manufacturers. So this is something to consider.
Absolutely. Good example, Mozzie. I had a similar project where we were looking for a certain type of screw, and the subcontractor actually sent me something from the Granger website that was supposed to be used for like internal, I forget what it was, like, the screws that you use to put your vent covers on. That's kind of what they were, and they wanted to use them outside for a semi-structural application. So that's a great point. Does anyone else have stories of these kind of either wonky substitutions that you've received from contractors, or a case where a substitution kind of went sideways on you?
I received a request to basically we specified a coating system for, I guess, for structural steel, where in our spec basically we have the primer, the intermediate and top coat from, I guess, from a system from a specific manufacturer. And again, due to the I guess, lack of materials. The contractor was saying, okay, we already have this primer, and that was from one manufacturer. Can we use the intermediate coat from this other manufacturer, which is also in our spec, so that way I can proceed? And I said, no, we cannot do that, because if we do that, I guess we are not using a compatible system, and our system performance relies on compatibility. So we need to have a system that is fully compatible. So I guess the answer was no. And they say, well, we will need to wait until the product is available. And I told them, well, or you could specify a different, we can review a different system, but it has to be a complete system. We cannot just mix and match components from different manufacturers.
No, that's also very important. You don't want to start mixing things that aren't tested to perform that way. Thanks, Enrique. Anybody else? Otherwise, we'll wrap this up, and hopefully, if anything, this was just a good reminder of, I know CA, it can sometimes be a long drawn out process. I know sometimes you get the submittals and they're like, okay, I want you to review it and I want it back in 24 hours. That happened to me. I'm sure it happens to you guys too.
Well,
and
I have one
Jackie.
item, Jackie.
yeah, I heard
Someone else
Randy and I
has-
heard someone else.
Yeah, Randy, go ahead.
Well, we're not going to get away from this too quickly. So if others don't have examples, I do think that you need to go back to the process where construction administration really starts, at the pre-construction meetings. And you need a, a pre-con for every, excuse me, really every different technology that you're using on a project, whether it's demolition, whether it's surface preparation, whether it's concrete placements, coatings, sealants, expansion joints, working your way up the building, same thing. Everything that you have a different technology, as long as you put it into your specs ahead of time, you do need pre-con meetings, and you can, as long as you get it into your specs, call for the mock-ups. Mock-ups ahead of time will force the contractor to show you how they're going to do it in an organized fashion. You're going to find out real quick if they're a sophisticated contractor. You'll bring out the points that will fail during the application if you start this process. So some of these things you're identifying in your submittal process, again, as you receive them, you do follow that up with the mock-up system, on everything. And the only issue you have to have is you have to have it in your specs ahead of time. You can't ask a contractor to do something that they weren't prepared at the time of bidding, because that ends up being a change order. But you could mock them to death and really force them to do things the way you want them to do it with the products that you want. And you bring the manufacturers to the table, and can force their hand. That they're out there suffering through, maybe in silence, but figuring the process out, because that's what the contractor bid. And you especially use the mock-ups if somebody wants to use a change and do this submittal process and change the product. You put them through the ringer that shows that, if it's going to work out, it's got to be acceptable at that point. So it's really important to do this all in the beginning.
Absolutely. So I don't know if you were on when I started. This presentation wasn't intended to be comprehensive review of CA, but you're absolutely right. Pre-construction conferences for every system that you have out there is extremely important in order to set the standards that you're expecting from the contractor. So completely agree, Randy.
Yeah, I do think that Ed brought up the situation with the expansion joints, and really that's, that could be 25% of a construction project, and all it takes is one leak to make life miserable for everybody for several years afterwards. So
Yep.
when you catch the relationship between the change in manufacturers. Again, you force their hand by making them show you that they know what they're doing on paper. That's basically it. And you can catch the misery and mitigate the misery before they start doing any damage to the structure.
Good insight. Thanks so much, Randy. Amay, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, one thing I was going to add, this something came up recently. Before you send something out to bid, if you have any kind of epoxy products or any specialty, give those reps a call to find out if those are available and even manufactured, because there are certain epoxies or sealants are not manufactured at this time. And the other piece of it is I stumbled upon on a project where the steel fabricator kept on saying he cannot find our concrete repair products. I placed a call to the to the reps. They gave us exact quantities in Houston market that are available right now, and like information where the fabricator can go and find the material, because they were trying to use a Home Depot product instead.
Yep. I was about to say earlier how many people have had their contractor go to Home Depot and try to submit
Yeah.
something.
They
Totally
like
has happened.
Saccrete. Yeah, they like Saccrete.
Yep. And they, just as you said, so the project I was mentioning about concrete repair materials, they did the same thing to me. They said, this isn't available. We called the reps. The reps were like, no, we have that. And we gave them the information, and now they're using the products that we specified. Kind of a shame you have to fight them on it, but just the example that I went over, it's important that you either fight for your product that you've specified that you know that's going to perform, or you do the true through and through vetting of those systems before you approve it. So great
Jackie,
conversation.
just wanted to add to so as soon as contractors call us, because it's quite common that contractors would pick up the phone and call the PM. Oh, by the way, I don't have this product. Can I use this? And they're expecting you to give an answer over the phone. Or so as soon as I asked them, you know what? There's a substitution form in the package. Fill out that form and then attach all technical data that you want to basically use with the new product, the performance charts and all that stuff, and then also, if there's any credit to the owner, they would change their mind because it's okay. What is the reason that you want to replace it? You can't source it, or is it a better product, or if it's a cheaper product? If it's a cheaper product, then how much is the credit to the project? Uh, then as soon as if I mention something like that, but as a PM, we have to be cautious too. Sometimes, if we insist on a product that is spec'd in our technical spec and they run into certain problems on site, which are probably unforeseen at the time that the project was tendered out, we have to listen to them sometimes. Sometimes the waterproofing, the substrate is moist and we are specing a product that may not fully adhere to the system. And there are certain products that may be I would say water actuated system that if there's any minor moisture in the system, it would still cure. So if we have something that if they claim that the system may not perform as intended because of certain issues, it would be wise to listen to them, not just ignoring them and say, no, I respect this product and you have to be using this system. So it's kind of a listening practice and negotiating and understanding what the real problem is, and then allowing and comparing what the performance problems are.
Hey, Mozzie, my response to that would be you should have done there should have been the mock-up process that Randy was talking about. Randy?
Yeah, if I could add to that. So when you're writing your specs for these projects, there's a section in there for the submittals as to how much time you have as an engineer to respond to the submittals. I can't recall if you have 72 hours or 3 days, 5 working days, whatever it is. It does need to vary per the type of project. So you may have a simple project, you should turn your submittals around quicker. There's a reasonable amount of time that everybody is allowed to review and then respond to the submittal. But during the restoration renovation projects that we have, the client is going through misery with this kind of work. You have to be very aware of the pain they're feeling. And so if the contractor's sending you submittals Try to turn them around as quickly as you can, reasonably, especially the ones that are not at risk. Just get them, turning them back around, get them back out. Don't wait your full time period to respond. It shows the client that, well, maybe he's not paying enough attention to his project. And the thing that it does is it builds kind of like an animosity with the contractor, that it is taking you little while to respond to the submittals. So what I'm getting at is the ones that are very important, the comprehensive ones, take your time on those, get them right. The other ones, get them out quickly. You need to build a bank of trust amongst both the client and the contractor, because there will be discussions and disputes on a particular issue that you need to have developed a relationship with everybody on the project. And you don't want to burn bridges by taking too long on submittals that are very easy to turn around. So you want to show that responsiveness, get out there, get them back to everybody. And then on the serious ones, take the appropriate amount of time and get it done right, and make sure that the client is aware of the timeline and what you're looking for on those comprehensive ones, so that he sees that you're doing this diligently on his behalf. Okay, that's all.
Enrique, did you have something else? I see your hand is still up. I didn't know if you had another comment to add.
Oh, I didn't realize I raised my hand. Sorry.
It's okay. I just wanted to make sure.
But I mean, now that you ask me, I think Masi made a good point that about listening to the contractors, because I have also run into that. I mean, we are not perfect, and sometimes every now and then we may specify something that may not necessarily be the best application, I guess. And sometimes contractors have come up with suggestions that make sense, I guess, and consider the substitution. So I think there are instances where it's where we need to have some be open, because there may be some cases where sometimes a proposed substitution could make sense. I'm saying that because I run that with may will remember in TMC Garage 17, we run into one of those cases. So
yeah, absolutely. It can be very helpful to the contractor or the client. My overarching point is the substitutions can work, and in appropriate circumstances they should be accepted. But make sure that you're understanding all aspects of the substitution and not blindly going off of face value. Okay, well, I guess with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. Hopefully everyone learned something or just heard some different perspectives that can help us all be better engineers, better specifiers, and we can apply in the future. Thank you, everyone.